Hi, fifth grade readers. We're going to be doing plot practice. You can listen to this passage as many times as you need to, and then if you would like to hear the questions, you can continue in the video. You should be on Illuminate, following along with me. Cousin Carmen. We're going to visit Cousin Carmen, Roberto's mother said as she put on her coat. Roberto's stomach sank. He would have to spend an entire Saturday afternoon sitting in Cousin Carmen's stuffy apartment, not touching anything. Cousin Carmen was fussy about dirt and neatness. Even the tiniest speck of dust did not escape her notice. In fact, in order to keep the dust out of her apartment, she rarely opened the windows. The other thing about Cousin Carmen was she collected breakable objects. She had sets of delicate teacups and drinking glasses. An array of glass picture frames and tiny statues covered her tables. Vases decorated every room. Assembled on a special shelf next to the piano sat the most breakable things. Cousin Carmen's glass animal collection. Roberto loved to look at the delicate animals, but he was careful to never ever handle them. What would happen if he broke one by accident? What would Cousin Carmen do? He was terrified to think about the consequences. Scroll down. Hello, hello, my darlings, Cousin Carmen greeted them as she opened the door. My, how you've grown, dear, she exclaimed to Roberto, patting him on the head. Roberto wiped his feet with extra vigor on the doormat, tiptoed carefully across Cousin Carmen's spotless white carpet, and sat down on the edge of the crisp blue sofa. Now, dear, said Cousin Carmen kindly to Roberto, I have 2 kinds of cake. Would you like chocolate or lemon? Cousin Carmen was known for making delicious cakes. It was worth visiting just to have a slice of the yummy treats that came from her kitchen. Chocolate was his favorite flavor, but then he imagined dropping a dark crumb on the snowy white carpet. I'll have lemon, please, he answered quickly. Cousin Carmen bustled off to the kitchen. I think I'll go help her, said Roberto's mother. I'll be back in a minute. Sit here quietly and don't touch anything. Roberto sat stiffly on the sofa, holding his feet out in front of him. He didn't want the bottoms of his shoes to touch the white carpet. He sat and waited, wiggling his toes in his tight shoes. His eyes surveyed the room. All he noticed were teacups, fancy glasses, and china vases. Suddenly, his eyes fell upon the glass animal collection. There was something new there. It was bigger and more colorful than the other animals. Roberto couldn't quite identify what it was and needed a closer look. Slowly, Roberto lowered his feet onto the white carpet. Then he crept carefully over to the shelf. Right on the edge of the shelf perched a multicolored glass parrot. It was so shiny and colorful, Roberto had to touch it. Slowly, he extended a finger and touched the top of the parrot's head. It was cold and hard. He ran his finger down the parrot's smooth back, then plop. Roberto gasped. He was afraid to look, but when he did, the parrot lay at his feet. There was not a single scratch on it because the soft carpet had cushioned its fall. With a trembling hand, Roberto picked it up and set it back on the shelf. Roberto's hand was shaking so much, the parrot slipped off the shelf and tumbled against the shelf below with a loud crash. Roberto looked down and saw the shelf covered with pieces of broken multicolored glass. He recognized part of the yellow beak and pieces of the red wings. Now what could he do? Desperately, he tried to gather up the pieces. There were so many little ones, he couldn't get them all. Where would he put them? Anyway, Cousin Carmen was sure to notice the parrot was missing. Surely she would realize it was Roberto's fault. What could he do? Here you are, dear, said Cousin Carmen cheerily as she entered the room with a plate of cake. She stopped short when she saw Roberto's ashen face and shaking hands. Then she saw the brightly colored pieces of broken glass. I see you discovered my parrot, she stated slowly. It was a present from an acquaintance. She paused. Do you know what? I didn't particularly like it because it had a mean expression. She scrunched up her face into an exaggerated grimace, trying to encourage Roberto to laugh. He managed a smile. There, dear, she said. It's just a silly thing. It didn't even match the other animals in my collection. The important thing is you came to visit me. Now, sit down and enjoy some cake. Roberto sat on the couch and hugged Cousin Carmen. He savored the large slice of lemon cake and asked for a slice of chocolate, too. When he picked up the fancy glass to take a sip of milk, his hand didn't tremble at all. So you can go back and re-listen to this passage, or you could proceed to the questions independently. Another option is to listen to me read the questions out loud. Question number 1. Look at the chart of information from the selection. Roberto and his mother go to visit Cousin Carmen. Roberto sits quietly and looks at Cousin Carmen's collection of glass animals. Blank box. Cousin Carmen tells Roberto she's glad he came to visit. Which statement belongs in the empty box? A. Roberto's mother and Cousin Carmen go into the kitchen to get cake. B. Cousin Carmen is a good cook and Roberto looks forward to some cake. C. As Roberto places a glass parrot back on the shelf, it falls and breaks. D. Cousin Carmen tells Roberto that he has grown. You can always pause it and answer the question. I'm just going to proceed right through the questions. Number 2, why are paragraphs 2 and 3 important to the selection? A. They show how clean and careful Cousin Carmen is. B. They tell how Roberto likes to visit his cousin's apartment. C. They describe Cousin Carmen's glass animals. D. They show how uncomfortable and nervous Roberto feels. Question 3. Which sentence helps the reader predict that Roberto is going to touch one of the glass animals? A. Cousin Carmen bustled off to the kitchen. B. Roberto sat stiffly on the sofa holding his feet out in front of him. C. He sat and waited, wiggling his toes in his white shoes. D. His eyes surveyed the room. Question 4. The reader can tell the parrot is going to get broken because A. Roberto's hand is trembling as he places it back on the shelf. B. There are too many glass animals on the shelf. C. Roberto hears Cousin Carmen talking and drops the parrot. D. There is not enough room on the shelf for the parrot. Number 5. Which sentence from the selection is an example of foreshadowing? Foreshadowing means that it predicts what's going to happen next. Gives you clues. A. In fact, in order to keep the dust out of her apartment, she rarely opened the windows. B. Roberto loved to look at the delicate animals, but he was careful to never ever handle them. C. It was worth visiting just to have a slice of the yummy treats that came from her kitchen. D. When he picked up the fancy glass to take a sip of milk, his hand didn't tremble at all. Again, you can go back and re-listen to the passage or any of the questions. When you're done, you've answered the questions on the right and hit submit, finish test, and then telling me finished in the chat. Good luck.